Think change management is about just sending a few emails and everything's going to be okay? Think again. In today's episode, we are busting the top 3 myths about change management and giving you practical tips to manage the next change successfully. Whether you're managing a major transformation or a small shift, these tactics are going to set you up for success. Stick with us. Hey everyone, John here. 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 Welcome to the Leaders Leading Leaders podcast. Hey everyone, John here. Welcome to the Leaders Leading Leaders podcast. Change is inevitable, and we must learn how to lead through change. And in today's episode, we are going to bust the top 3 myths to change management. Change management isn't just about running a company, isn't just about running or having a team. We go through change in our daily lives, and this impacts us in a very big way. So think about how these myths are applicable not only to the business world as a leader, as a team lead, maybe just as a team member, but I also want you to think about how you lead change as a mother, as a father, as a grandfather, as an aunt, uncle, whatever your sphere of influence is. There will always be a time when you have to pivot and look at things a different way, change direction, reinvent yourself, whatever that looks like. Change management is a foundational skill that we all need to get through life. So in today's episode, I'm going to talk about first 3 myths, and then in each myth, we will uncover some practical applications for you to bust that myth. So let's talk about the first myth, and this one has to do with change management is all about communication. How many times have we gone through a change, and instead of actually figuring out how we are going to help people through the change, we just blast them with a ton of communication. We almost over-communicate, right? We turn to, hey, we're not communicating enough, so let's just send out more emails. Let's just send out more texts. Let's just call them more and tell them that the change is coming. That isn't helping. Change is not just about communication. Communication is a big part of change management, but it's not the only thing that we need to consider when we are planning for change. So the bust here for that myth is communication is important, but it needs not to be the whole story. And here's why. One of the things that I've helped executive leadership do, I've helped companies, I've helped teams, I've helped parents, is develop this clear strategy, this vision, this purpose for what you are trying to get done. And when there is a change to that vision, purpose, mission of your organization, of your family, of your team, you have to redirect and you have to clearly state the new vision and purpose. Think about this in a major move that you're having to make with your family. You're a mother and you're a father, and you have taken a new job opportunity and it's halfway across the country. It's far away. And you are going to have to uproot your kids who may be in that middle school 10 to 12 or even high school 15, 16, 17 year age, when at that part of their lives, it's everything to them. Do you think that just by communicating that you are moving and here's the date is going to be good enough for them? Probably not. You have to explain why. You have to give them a clear direction around why this is important for the family to come together. You may have had a very clear purpose of why you were located. Maybe it was your home. Maybe it was all you knew. Maybe you grew up there. Maybe you have family that help you out and surround you. Now that vision and purpose is changing. So you have to be able to sit down and have a clear and concise conversation with your family about why this move needs to take place. In the business world, you see this with consolidations or mergers. And maybe you're taking 2 companies who do similar work, but probably had different visions and missions. And now you're bringing those groups of people together. That one company has to redefine their mission and vision. So it's no different. Whether it's a small change or whether it's a major transformation, you have to go back through that process of establishing a clear purpose, mission, or vision for the change. What it's going to look like after the change and how it benefits the employee, the stakeholder, the child in this example with moving the home. Whoever is going to be impacted needs to hear the new mission, vision, and purpose. So that's the first thing about how we bust the myth of communication is the only thing. We need to communicate, but we need to communicate the why. So it adds context there. The other part to this myth is engaging those stakeholders. So don't think of stakeholders just in the business sense. Anybody who is impacted by the change is considered a stakeholder when I'm talking here. So it could be your children, it could be your spouse, it could be friends, it could be family, or it could be employees, it could be team members, peers, colleagues, whatever that looks like. So think of those people, that group, when I say stakeholders, but we need to engage our stakeholders early and often. Early in the process, as soon as that decision is made, that change is upon us, and you have developed your mission vision, it's clear in your mind enough to where you can begin to communicate it. Because sometimes that's where the other challenge comes from, is we don't understand the change. As the leaders of our families, as the leaders of our organizations, as the leaders of our teams, we don't understand why we are changing. So give yourself that time to begin the journey of understanding. And then once you understand, now it's time to formulate that clear mission vision and then engage the stakeholders as early in that process as you possibly can. And then keep them engaged all along down the road. Whether it's checking in on them, hey, how you doing today? Just wanted to see if you had any feedback, if you had any comment about we talked about yesterday. You can do it weekly. You can hold meetings. You can do one-on-ones. Whatever that looks like for you in your particular situation when it comes to change management, make sure that that's occurring. And then last but not least, provide the resources that individuals are going to need to change, to make the change. It could be knowledge. You could have to provide some training. You could have to tell why in your vision and mission 700 different times, because people, when they hear it, it's not always going to sink in. So yeah, this goes back to why communication is important. But again, what is it? What resources do they need? It could be ability. Do they have the ability to change? If not, are we going to have to train them? In the example of a business merger that you're bringing two groups together, maybe you're consolidating into one system and one company is unfamiliar with that system. So do they have the ability to change? If not, let's give them the training that they are going to need. And then last but not least, the desire here. I always think about people whenever change. That's just where my mind goes first. Some people think very logically and they think about the bottom line. I can do that, but my leadership style is to think about the people. So just like I had to get some time to digest the change and the why before I formulated my purpose and my vision and the message that I was going to go out with, they are going to need that time to digest all that information and then create that desire to change. In some cases, that desire may never come. You just may have to lead by example through the change, and then hopefully they'll get on board. But that desire may not be there during the change or the date that the change is going to happen. You're just going to have to lead through that. As a parent, you're going to have to lead through that. As a leader in business, you're going to have to lead through that. Maybe as a student that's changing schools. Whatever the change looks like for you, if the desire is not there, you got to take that step and you got to trust in yourself, and then hopefully it will come. Okay? So that's myth one. Change management is only about communication. And we gave you 3 reasons why communication is a piece of it, but it's not the whole story. So let's talk about myth number 2. And this one has to do with, and I'm laughing, I'm sorry, because I've heard it way too many times, is that We'll just send out the communication and then it happens overnight, right? Change just happens overnight. That's not the case. Change is a process. It's not an event. Now, somebody out there may be saying, what about an accident that happens and it changes the course of your life? Yeah, it could be that one event that changes the course of your life or changes what your life looks like moving forward, but it's the process after that I'm talking about here. Just doesn't happen overnight. It just doesn't happen in a blink of an eye. And now all of a sudden, I'm in this new environment. I'm in this new, really ecosystem of people and processes and systems and weather, whatever that looks like, whatever your change looks like, it just doesn't happen overnight. So the bust to that myth is think about change as a process, not about an event. And here's why. Whenever we are going through change, we have to set realistic expectations. Going back to that first example of moving your family, yeah, as soon as you probably need to inform the family that you're going to be putting your house up for sale. You have to set some realistic expectations for your family, and based on when you need to sell your house, of course, for them to let that really set in, because you're going to maybe be moving some furniture out. You're going to be maybe taking some pictures off the wall. You're going to bring change to what they have known as their home to stage it for people to start coming in, potential buyers to come into the home. I've sold a couple homes, and the first thing that the realtor does is come in and they say, hey, you got to declutter. All those things that we were comfortable with and the pictures on the wall and things like that, you got to declutter a lot of that. So your children, your family are going to begin to experience that. In the business world, you got to set some realistic expectations. If it's a merger, if it's a consolidation, if it's a reorg, whatever that looks like, there has to be realistic expectations set on when the new manager, leader is going to meet with the team. Inform the team as much as you possibly can. People, again, get very nervous whenever changes. We are creatures of habit. And you tell me that now I got to change either positions, companies. What's that going to look like? How is it going to impact my benefits? That's the first thing that I'm going to think about. My health insurance, if you got a family and you need that health insurance, it's very important. My pay. Am I going to have to relocate? So provide them all that information and then set some realistic expectations for that change to occur. The other one, celebrate small wins to maintain momentum. I'm a true believer in small wins. Now, I'm also a true believer that you got to set milestones. You work in 90-day sprints. So whatever that looks like for you, your small wins could just be first sending out the communication and opening up a portal for feedback. Check. That's the first win that you have, because until then, the change has all been behind the scenes. Now it's up front. Now you've let the secret out of the box. That's a small win for you, because after that, you're going to have to start fielding questions about the why, about the purpose. So that's why you got to have all of that stuff already there. And then along with the expectations, let them know a timeline. So celebrate those small wins, and it'll help you maintain momentum along the way. And then last on this particular myth is review and adjust your plan. Don't be so hard-headed to think that when you lay out this change management strategy 6 months before the change happens, everything is going to work out to that plan. Be a little malleable here in how you think about and review the change management plan or that strategy, or whatever you've come up with. Again, this doesn't have to be a formal plan, but I would assume, as I do, most of you, if it's a major move, you got a particular date that you got to be in the office at the new location, and everything's going to kind of work backwards from there. Maybe you have kids in school and you want them to finish out that school year. So then the house will go up for market after that. Maybe you're keeping the house. Maybe you're moving. Whatever that looks like, make sure that you're reviewing and adjusting that plan, because things could change. And there is one thing that is constant, is that change will occur, even through the change management process. So I just ask, be flexible, try to be understanding, and then review and adjust that plan as it happens to be. So those were the things with the myth of change happens overnight. Think of change as not an event, but as a process. Okay, you guys ready for 3? So myth number 3 is leaders drive change alone. And if you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, you know that a leader doesn't do anything alone. In fact, I would argue that I work for my team as a leader, not the other way around. I work for my family as the father, not the other way around. So the myth here in the bust to that is change is a team effort. Every stakeholder is in that team. Please don't take this as you're in this alone and everybody has to suffer with you. That's not what I'm talking about when it comes to leaders leading change alone. It goes back to the strategy, the mission, the vision of why we are changing and communicating that out. So each one of these myths build upon each other. The first myth, communication is the only way. Nope, it's not the only way. It's a way. The second one, change happens overnight. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. The third one here, leaders drive change alone. We have to get others on board. We have to be excellent communicators and pull in all of our favors that in our influence that we have been working so hard to create here, because what you need to do as a leader, the most important thing in this time, you just need to listen. And you need to make sure where people are at, because you'll have your early adopters and you'll have your late bloomers. So people, you'll tell them once and they'll be like, all right, what do we got to do? Let's go do it. And then there's those people that need to hear it 5 or 6 different times. And they still might not adopt it just yet. So there are going to be people in all different phases of the change process. And you as the leader, as the father, the mother, whatever that looks like, you're going to have to manage all of those people in those processes. And the one way that I like to do that is just listen and get those check-ins, get those regular check-ins. That's why, again, this all builds upon each other. There's just not one single strategy here that I want you to take away today. It goes back to stakeholder engagement early and often. You should be getting ahead of any really big major crises or people just resisting just to resist. That's the check-in process. So for here, get the levels. You got to get first, as a husband, I got to get my spouse on board. I got to tell them and then answer any questions there, because if we two are not on board, how do we even expect our children to get on board? And then if you're a company, you got to get whatever level of management probably directly below you or leadership below you, you got to get them on board and them understanding the purpose and the vision of what the company or what the team will look like after. That makes sense? So get that next level, get your spouse, your significant other, whatever that looks like. It's a team effort. You got to get them also bought in. And this isn't a forceful bought in. This may take time, and you continue to communicate. You continue to check in often and build that trust and use that influence. So the second one here I want to talk about under the myth of leaders driving change alone is the feedback loop. You have to create some type of feedback loop for the stakeholders to provide feedback that are going through the change. So what's that look like? I mentioned earlier that I will shoot out a text after the initial message comes out, asking people how they, any questions that they have, how it sat with them, do they understand? So ask those open-ended questions and then allow some time for that feedback. Again, people that are in different phases of change, they are going to give you feedback at different times. It's just how people process information. It's not good or bad just because somebody processes change quicker than somebody else doesn't make them any better or doesn't make them any least resistant to change. That's how they process information. But you got to provide that feedback loop, that open door of communication. What's that going to look like? Anytime we're talking about communication, we want to have a push and a pull. So you are going to push out updates, any information that you can, and then also you're going to pull communication back through our feedback loops. So very important to have both as you are moving through the change management process. And then last, recognize those that are contributing to the change process. And this doesn't have to be a big recognition. You're not going to call them out and give them a trophy. That's not what I mean here by recognizing them. What I like to do is my early adopters, I meet with them pretty regularly, because they're going to be my eyes and ears. If they've already accepted that change is coming and they understand the why, I'm going to be tapping into them. Okay, what are you feeling? What's your pulse? Put your thumb or your finger on the pulse of the organization through your early adopters. What's the sense around the office? What's the sense around the team? And that's when you can know, what am I not seeing? How can I better communicate my message here, right? So I was watching a movie, a show the other day with my wife, and just the gist of it, the story was that the world was ending and they were building this city in a mountain, underneath a mountain. And they were talking about that whole change, right? You're having to set up a whole ecosystem, select people who are going to live here. You're going through it. It just, as I was journaling and thinking about the episode today, it reminded me about that. Just came to my mind. It was fresh on my mind. And one of the things in there, the president, that was the current president, U.S. president at the time, was the president down there in the city. For those of you that know the story I'm talking about, I'm not going to mention it, but I won't ruin the secrets here. He was very concerned about people that were going through this change. And he constantly checked in with, what are you hearing? What's the pulse? The messages that I'm communicating, are they resonating with others? What are they not getting? And that's where this feedback loop comes from. And then the ones that, you're going to tap into, those early adopters, reward them. Let them know how thankful you are for them out there leading the way, providing the feedback, whatever that looks like. But that's going to be an important part. So that's myth 3. Leaders drive change alone. No, the bust there is leaders. We need to be on board with the change first, but change is a team effort. So those are the 3 myths. Just to recap on what we talked about. First, change is inevitable. We are all going to go through change in our lives, personal, work life, business life. And one thing that I would urge you to do is don't go through it alone. Make sure that you yourself understand the purpose and the vision. Communication is not the only way to distribute change management. It is one of the methods to distribute, and we talked about some ways of developing clear strategy, engaging your stakeholders early and often, and then making sure that they have the resources they need to change. Myth number 2, centered around change happens overnight. We know that's not true. It's a process, not just an event. So what are you going to want to do there? Set those realistic expectations. You're going to want to celebrate those small wins and then review and adjust that plan. Be malleable enough, be flexible enough to adjust those dates or whatever you're trying to get through as far as the change process. And then leaders drive change alone. We know that's not the case. This needs to be a team effort. So make sure that you are empowering those around you that are early adopters and that understand why this change needs to be. Create that feedback loop for everybody else. So what are you missing? What do they need? What else do they need? This may identify any training, or resource gaps that you haven't thought of, and then recognize and reward those that are leading through this change with. So one story I want to share here, and it has to do with the change that I had to make whenever I knew that medical school wasn't in my deck of cards, and I went into this training world, and I was going through all of this with my family, because at that time, all they had heard me say is that this was my dream. This was my vision. And I had to craft a new vision for my family. I had to let them know that, I wasn't going to go in the medical field. I was switching gears and I was going to get into training. And there was a lot of things that came through that. I had to take a pay cut. So there were sacrifices that had to be made. I was a young parent. My kids were involved in sports, competitive sports. Those were very expensive at the time. So we had to make some sacrifices there. We had to ask for more help from our, immediate family. And I'm talking my mom, my dad, my in-laws, because we were going to go back to work to make up some of the income nights and days. And that required, some help with the kids, getting them to some of these events. And then, one of the things that was probably the hardest for me is this change really impacted me mentally. Think about, a dream that you have right now, and that's what you're focused on, and that's what the only thing you have for you that you want to go do. And now things have changed. So this change didn't happen overnight for me. I had to make sure that I had to reset my expectations of myself, of where I wanted to be in the next year to 5 years. And then I also had to communicate that my spouse, and we had to be a team, and she was very supportive throughout. I'm very lucky because we did have to review and adjust the plan a couple times. I was a contractor, and that life was ever changing. So there was a lot going on. And then last but not least, I didn't do it alone. I didn't decide to not pursue a dream and switch paths alone. That was a family decision. That was something that we made as a family, decision-wise, because it impacted all of us. And I knew that they had my support, and I knew that they trusted me. And that meant the world to me. So whatever change that you're in, lean on these principles. Bust these myths and make sure that you're taking care of yourself along the way, and don't do it alone. I believe in you. I hope this helps somebody today. Go be great. We'll talk to everyone later. Bye-bye. If you like what you're hearing, do us a favor. Click on that subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up or leave a comment. That lets us know that what we are putting out benefits you. If you want additional information or resources or learn how to work with me, head on over to thejohnespinosa.com, because when we become better versions of ourselves, it helps us get others to where they're going. Go be great.